Good morning. Having some coffee here. I've got the space set up quite differently, and I'm going to see how things sound if I do some videos in this room now that I have some space, because I've got consistent lighting in this room. I'm not sure if it's going to be the best lighting for videos, but doing stuff in the living room as I've done for the past several years, the only real source of light that wasn't, incandescent or, yellow bulbs or bluish white LEDs and all that stuff. I was using natural sunlight, which was great when there was natural sunlight, though I would get reflections aplenty from the glass doors and such, as I'm sure you've seen in the videos. So here, I think I might be able to create a space where I can control the lighting and do things pretty much no matter what's happening outside or the time of the day, wife and neighbors permitting. But we'll see how the lighting and sound translates. I'm mostly doing close mic stuff, so I should be get away with a lot. I should be able to get away with a lot. But rooms do matter, and the front space does sound really good, at least in the room. Let's see how we do. So today's video is not scientific. I'm comparing this Mesa Boogie Mark 525 to the Egnator Tweaker, which is they're comparable amps in a lot of ways. I think the Egnater came in a combo as well, and I know that the Mark 25 comes in ahead. This is the combo version of the Mark 525, and so for fairness, I'll be running both amps through my shop cab, which is an 8-ohm cab, 2x12, ET65, and a Veteran 30. I've got the ET65 mic'd. So for everything that you hear, that will be the speaker, and the mic is not moving, and the recording levels are not moving. I may, at the end, move the mic up and hear the Boogie's Mesa's 10-inch speaker, but I thought it'd be more even comparison to the amps if they're through a consistent speaker for this. The Egnater does not have reverb, the Boogie does. I'll do the Boogie with and without so you can make some comparisons. This is not selling one or the other. This is just, hey, we've got two very small amps that make a lot of big promises. They're very different price points. Let's see how they sound. I'm going to try to keep any of my opinions to the objective from a text perspective. You can listen and see what you think about the sounds all you want. So we're going to start with the Tweaker. It has a lot of options, many fewer than the Boogie, but then again, it's a much lower price point. Let me say first off that its big brother, the Tweaker 40, is notorious among techs for having dead power transformers. That was a thing where the company that makes them, which is a plant in China, had changed power transformers based on than what Egnater had originally spec'd, and they had a lot of failures. So caveat emptor with the Tweaker 40, the 15s seem to be a little bit more reliable in that regard. So the features it has, it's got a tight switch and a deep switch, a bright switch and a normal, the gain, hot, clean. We're going to start with clean. Treble middle bass. A kind of misleading switch here, I think. It says USA AC Brit. So they're implying Fender, Vox, Marshall. And what that is doing, it is changing the slope resistor, so the amount of mids and bass versus treble, and it is changing the value of the treble cap. So while it shifts everything in certain ways, the values of the pots don't change. So you can think of it as USA AC Brit, but it has nothing in common with the AC30. And the tone stack is not going to behave like a Marshall tone stack. It's a plate follower, not a cathode follower. Think of it as a Fender with two other settings, and you'll be pretty much where reality is. It's a Fender tone stack with some tweaks to the slope resistor and the treble cap. Then the master's got a vintage modern switch. It's a very confusing schematic and the way it's drawn, and I've not gone in there and reverse engineered this section because it's a little tweaker. From what I can tell, it's changing whether the master volume is wired as a full pot, a 1 meg pot, where there's always that 1 meg load on the input of the previous stage, or whether it's wired as a variable resistor, in which case that resistance changes and you get a more loading. So let's hear it. Oh, one other thing I want to point out, this is a weakness that's an objective weakness of this amp. The master volume changes dramatically in this range. So noon. I mean, it's just gone by here. So I don't like the taper of this. Maybe if for the higher gain stuff that'd be useful, but. So let's do bright versus normal. As a tech and as a player, I think that's really nice. That's a nice range. It's not too dark when the bright's off. It's not too bright when the bright's on. Let's do tight versus deep. So here's deep. Tight. That's quite good. Kind of takes away that lowest octave. If you wanted to sound like a Princeton rather than a twin for the clean stuff. For the dirty stuff, that can be more useful. We'll get to that. Don't worry about that little pop when you hear that. That's not a problem. Let's look at the tone stack, and we're going to do these amps clean and dirty separately. So we're going to do the cleans of both, and we'll do the dirty of both because I need to change guitars. I initially, thinking about this video over coffee, this first cup of coffee this morning, was going to do a looper pedal and keep everything the same. But if you try these amps out, you're not going to have a looper pedal. You're going to make your impressions the same way you would in this kind of video. And this has so many features on the Boogie in particular. I mean, there's so many possible permutations that I'm not going to subject you to 30 minutes of the same loop playing while the knobs get fiddled. This is overview. How do these amps compare? What would either one appeal to you if you need a small amp which is just loud enough for gigs? For this tone stack stuff, I'm keeping the bright and off and the tight deep set to deep. From a text perspective, the treble pot is a linear taper, and the bass is audio taper, and the middle is linear. So you've got a linear 25K pot. So in the middle, it's about 12K. Bass, 250, treble. The actual Fenders, let's keep with the USA setting, the actual Fender amps from the 60s had a J taper pot here. So noon on the treble on a Fender would actually be about here. The bass correlates to the actual Fenders. The mids, however, this is 12K straight up the middle. Deluxe reverb is about right there. A twin with the mids set to stun is about right there. And a twin with the mids at noon is about right there. So this should be the most Fender sounding of the options. In terms of a Fender set flat without the bright switch. So let's add the bright switch and tweak the treble now. Let's turn that treble up just a hair. Ah! The amp overall is a little bit darker than the actual Fender because of other things I'm not going to get into. So it's fine if you want to turn the treble up, but I'm just saying in terms of what the tone stack does. Or turn the bright off and turn the treble up to compensate. Make it more like a deluxe reverb. The AC promises Vox no. Vox mid-range control, you can consider it to be a fixed 10K like that, and bass, up, treble, way the hell up. Let's see if this gets even in the ballpark. Now I hear that mid is centered, that mid frequency is centered too low to dial in and out the mids that a Vox does. I mean, I got the treble boosted here, and it just. I'm not saying that there aren't some sounds here that you would find useful. It's not a bad sounding setting. Let's do the tight switch for that. But it's not really doing what Vox does. Speaking of which, let's try the Marshall British setting. All right, again, this is on the clean stuff, and I got the master up. And by the way, I'll show the vintage modern on the master in a little bit. Not a huge difference, really. Shifts into a lower part of the lower mids get accentuated. And it has a bit more gain as a result. If you were to just, I don't know if you could necessarily pick them out from each other, if that's the only variation. It kind of sounds just like turning the gain up a bit, honestly. But let's see, to get more of a Marshall thing. Remember, this pot, it's 250K. A Marshall is 1 meg here, there's 1 meg audio taper. So at noon on a Marshall, it's at about 100K. At noon on this, it's at about 25K. So a Marshall would be much more like this. But that'll come into play when we revisit this amp for the higher gain stuff. The vintage modern. Kind of puts a blanket over the top end. And you lose low end. It's real MIDI, and you lose, even at 10, you lose a little bit of level. Now, you may think that's great if you need to smooth things up, and we'll check that when we come to the dirty stuff. It's much more subtle here at the very low ranges. I don't know, unless I had a guitar that was just way too bright no matter what else I did, I don't think I'd ever use that vintage switch. The temptation with anything like this is always, always to use the switch that says vintage, right? Because we want things to be vintage. I think it's just kind of dark and less interesting. There's nothing vintage about this circuit anyway. It's a master volume. It's a pre-phase inverter, post EQ master volume that can change the way it's wired, and therefore the impedance varies when it's in vintage mode. I'm just talking while I set this. Let's see, I'm going to do with EQ off. I want to stay with 10 watts. Okay, now we're on the Boogie. And this has got 2 channels. Each channel has 3 different modes. And each channel, with whichever mode, can then have the EQ on or off. And each channel can be 25 watts or 10 watts. And there is a reverb, though we'll get to that later. So I'm going to stick with the cleans. Now, there's only really 2 clean modes on this. I mean, I'll show one possible clean-ish sound you can get out of this on that channel. We're going to start with the tone stacks in presence at noon. They have separate tone stacks, which is an advantage over this, because this, if you go between hot and clean, you have one tone stack setting. Again, very different price points. So go full volume. This says 25. It's fixed bias pair of EL84s. It's probably closer to about 18 watts. I've not measured it. Maybe as much as 22. 25 is marketing because it sounds cool. 525. They're not going to call it 517.374. And the tweaker's 15 watts. You can't tell the difference between a 15 watt and a 20 watt amp in the room. It's going to depend on the speaker efficiency and the overall design. All right, so on this mid says mid from noon and below, and above mid it's a boost. And I have not looked at the schematic for that portion. That's something I do on Fenders, where I'll use 100K pots, which audio taper, so it's 10K at noon. So that's kind of like a Fender on 10 there. And as you go up, it defeats the tone stack. You get more mids and more drive. That sounds like what they've done there. So let's try the mids about 9 o'clock, which would be typical mids in a Fender. Probably a deluxe reverb's about right here, and a twin at noon's about right there. So let's start there. Got a glassiness I don't like. Dial that back a little bit. Got a very spongy low end. Not a huge fan of the low end. I'm not a fan of the noise level. That's a master dimed and the gain at 10 o'clock. And it's got a background hum that's not related to the gain setting at all. Let's see what it sounds like here. That sounds a lot better. I don't think that you can, I don't think the gain works the way it does in a Fender. So I don't think setting here is going to necessarily be dirty. Doesn't sound very good there, subjectively, but you know. That mushy bass is much better up here. I think it's just a matter of taper and gain staging. I think this is a better sound. I'm trying to, you know, I'm kind of exploring these amps along with you. I've not played this amp other than to verify that it was working before, because it was late at night. That brittleness in the high end that I did not like with the gain down here goes away with the gain here. What that is this has got to have a bright cap across this volume pot. This is gain pot. So as you turn it up, that bright cap does less and less. That brittleness is gone. So now we can turn the presence up to compensate, and that's a much nicer sound. But there's all that noise. All right, it's in the preamp. There's also a hum besides that buzz. And that basically, and this is going to offend some people, but I've worked on more of these than you have. That's the sound of a Mesa. That hum and buzz, they have so many components crammed right next to each other and so many wires going every which way. They just take everything anyone has ever written about how to keep stages separate from each other and to reduce noise and to reduce crosstalk and all these actual things. And they just throw it out the window and say, well, fuck it, man. Let's put everything in this little box and just jam it all together. And that's what you get. You get a good sound with a bunch of stuff in the background. Let's go to the fat mode, which is a cathode trick and losing some highs. You're going to notice that fat, clean sound more when the gain's lower. I'm not going to get into the EQ on this amp too much. It's a graphic EQ. Mesa's been doing this as long as I've been alive, pretty much. So you can do all that stuff, the smiley face, but the way this would be most useful for most players, and I'll show that when we get to the dirty stuff, is just to set it as a boost for leads. You know, your mileage probably will vary. People disagree about all kinds of things in this world. Let's see how the cleans are on the dirty channel. Oh, listen. All that hum and buzz are gone. It's just gone, at least at this volume setting. You can hear that real forward upper mids of this channel. This is the Mark IIc setting, the Mark IV setting. There's just so much crazy gain there. If I'm playing with the volume, the gain knob down here, and I'm getting just the edge of breakup with low output single coils, that's just a lot of gain on tap. That mid spot isn't doing much on this Mark IIc setting. It's got some stuff up. Not really affecting much there. Let's try the Mark IV. More control, and then the extreme. All right, what I think is happening here, and I've got the EQ off, I think this channel has got a mids notch, which is set pretty much where this mids control would be. So it can't bring more out. If you really crank it, you hear it boost. But it's not doing much to the actual mids. That's a wasted pot. It doesn't really offer in much fine control. So if you have one of these and you use the gain channel, you might need to use the EQ. All right, I'm gonna take a break and get another cup of coffee. Then we're gonna go through these again and do some dirty stuff. Ooh, we like the dirty stuff.